Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us for a conversation with Ray McGuire, who is running to be the next mayor of our great city. This is our 10th mayoral candidate conversation. I want to thank Melva for making sure we all spent the last 10 weeks in a deep conversation about policy and the future of our city. I'll say also, in just under 10 weeks from now, we will all go to the polls for the primary. The nice thing is, I think you can start to feel that people have realized that there is election going on. There was when we started this, it was a little worry like, oh my God, this is happening and nobody is paying attention to this. And I think people also starting to see just how important this election is for our city. So it is on. And I hope in these last 10 weeks, Abney has helped you think about the issues and be informed when you all make your decisions. I'll say one last thing is please engage your networks, no matter how big or small. Please tell people to vote. Hock your mom. My mom was hocking me this morning about something. And I'm just going to say, like, it is so important that we get out to vote, because if you look historically, we do not vote in primaries, and that is tragic. All right, on to our candidate today. Ray McGuire's journey is a success story that can only be described as inspirational. It is an amazing story that helps reinforce the best things both about our city and about our nation. He was raised by a single mother and his grandparents in Dayton, Ohio. Ray's mother was a social worker, and his family instilled in him the belief that through education and hard work, he could achieve a better life. He became the first person in his family to graduate from college and went on to earn law and business degrees, all from Harvard. And as we say around Abney, if you aren't going to go to CUNY, you might as well go to Harvard. He rose through the ranks of Wall Street to become the head of global corporate and investment banking at Citigroup, one of our city's most significant private sector employers. His work at Citi and the teams he led and his financial acumen helped grow businesses and create jobs. And he has given back to our city through his philanthropic work and his civic work. As a City Foundation board member, he co-authored a report on the economic impact of systemic racism. He serves on the boards of the De La Salle Academy, New York Presbyterian Hospital, the New York Public Library, the Whitney, and the Studio Museum in Harlem. Central to Ray's candidacy is his commitment to what he has branded the comeback. He wants to take the skills he honed over decades in the private sector and in his life experience overcoming adversity to spur an inclusive and effective economic renewal from our current crisis. Among his proposals are an education plan focused on cradle to career model, including holding himself personally responsible for every child being able to read by the end of third grade during his first term. He is also guaranteeing a summer job to every New York City public high school student who wants one. His public safety plan, focused on racial and social justice, will start with a newly created deputy mayor for public safety, who will have direct oversight of the NYPD, as well as other criminal justice agencies. His jobs plan that would bring back 50,000 jobs by covering 50% of workers' salaries for 1 year at small businesses that were hardest hit by the pandemic. He has ambitious plans to address significant issues like affordable housing and homelessness. And given his unique experience in finance, he brings an unusual set of skills to help manage our city's budget. We look forward to hearing more about him and his policies. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm Abby welcome. Zoom over to you, Ray. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Abney. Listen, this will be a great day. It's going to be a great morning already. Melva and Miller told me I look good, so this is all that I need. I could just stop right here, but since Melva won't allow that, she runs a tight ship, so I'm gonna dive right in. But before that, he did say I think this is the 10th, and what we all know is that we remember the last one, and the last shall be made first. So I'm okay with me being the number 10th one. You'll remember me, because I guarantee I would really doubt that you remember what any of the other 9 have said. You'll remember this. So thank you for having me, Abney. And how fitting is this? It's fitting to be with Abney. I think about where we were in the 70s. And history tells us that Abney came together in 1971 to respond to a crisis much like the one we face today. I can remember talking to Dick Ravage and Peter Solomon, and they were there in the 70s, along with Victor Gottbaum and Felix Royden, where business, labor, and government came together, which is exactly what we're going to need today to deal with this crisis. And so we look at, let me give you some framework for where we are. Unemployment is reaching historic highs, over 13% in New York City, up more than 9% from just 1 year ago. Impact has been even greater in some parts of the city. In the Bronx, for example, unemployment is nearly 18%. That is what's recorded. And we all know that it's likely those numbers are up more than that. Our office buildings remain largely empty, with only 15% of the workers having returned to an in-work person. In Manhattan, there's 100 million square feet of office space out of 450 million available for rent. That's 37% or so higher than a year ago. In our last two largest central business districts, there's never been more available office space, almost 20%, much higher than what we saw after the September 11 attacks or the Great Recession. As a result, as many of you know, the city expects a property tax revenue to decline for the first time in more than 2 decades by as much as $2.5 billion in the next fiscal year. We lost more than 630,000 jobs last year, and there's no sugarcoating that. And while summer returns, vaccinations increase, many of the job losses are permanent, with more than 300,000 lost in the hospitality industry alone. Many of the businesses that created those jobs just simply no longer exist. As of 2019, there were 230 small businesses in the city. Since the start of the pandemic, as many as 4 out of 10 have closed. These are neighborhood restaurants, corner bodegas, and the family-owned stores that define our city's character. And I'll tell you the truth, these losses have not been equal. Women have suffered enormous losses in the COVID economy, not only because they've lost their own jobs, but because many of them had the added burden of being expected to quit work to take care of their children who've been kept out of school. Minority-owned businesses were disproportionately affected not just by the pandemic, but also by the government's ineffective response. They were least likely to receive funding through the Paycheck Protection Program, receiving only about 30% of the funds despite being the hardest hit. 7 out of 10 jobs we've lost belong to workers of color. Now, thanks to President Biden and Vice President Harris's American Rescue Plan, we now have resources to stave off what would have been an immediate budget crisis. But let's be very clear, that money needs to be well spent, and it will not last forever. If we don't get our economy started again, we'll be back in 2 years facing the same budgetary crisis. And that's why we need a mayor who knows how businesses work, not one whose first management job will be mayor of the city of New York. Listen, like each of you, I love this city. It's given me everything personally. It has given me everything professionally. It's been great to me. It has given me the experience that is so desperately needed to meet this moment. I spent 40 years in business, refining the management and financial and leadership expertise that we need to turn the city's economy around and lead this city forward. For 13 years as a head of investment banking at Citigroup, and I would be remiss if I didn't say the longest standing head of investment banking in the history of Wall Street. I led high stakes negotiations with Fortune 500 companies. I managed budgets that are larger than most state budgets. Now, I know that's a lot of pressure for anyone, but imagine doing that as the only Black man in the room. Clients and companies didn't know what to make of me at first, just like many voters hearing my story for the first time. But I excelled because I got the opportunity. And once I got the opportunity to perform, I did. They trusted my vision and my judgment. They trusted me to guide them through challenging moments in the lives of their businesses. And they trusted me to bring everyone to the table, even sometimes sworn enemies. We had to find common ground. Now, I know there are slight differences between running a company and running a city, but as someone who has managed thousands of workers globally, I believe that the best predictor of future success is past accomplishment. And as they say in the neighborhood, I have receipts. And I have a message today for the entrepreneurs, the small business owners, and the entire business community. When I'm mayor, you'll have a partner, someone who has been where you are and where you plan to go, someone who will fight for you. Today, I'm here to tell you how we can work together, put New Yorkers back to work, how we'll lead the greatest and most inclusive comeback in our city's history. If there's one single thing I want you to take away from today's meeting, it's this: no jobs, no city. No jobs, no dignity. As mayor, I will make New York City the easiest place in America to start and run a business. And this is where my comeback plan comes in. The comeback plan, simply put, is a blueprint, detailed blueprint for revitalizing and rebuilding New York City and bringing back 500,000 jobs. It has at its core three pillars: go big, go small, and go forward. It begins by going big through investment in a major infrastructure program that will create jobs, good paying jobs, rebuilding our roads and bridges, fixing subway elevators, creating and renovating affordable housing, and making our city more sustainable. And to help us go forward, it includes those Black, Brown, Asian, and LGBTQ2 plus New Yorkers who have been excluded, who make the city what it is. The comeback plan creates a $50 million loan fund targeted to small MWBEs, and it ensures that affordable childcare for all the parents so they can go back to work. But the plan's centerpiece is to go small by allowing the businesses that have made it through the pandemic to get back to their feet, helping the businesses who closed to open back up, and making it easier than ever before for new businesses to start from scratch. It includes a comeback job accelerator that will subsidize 50,000 small businesses. It includes a sales tax rebate that put more than $500 million back in the hands of small business owners. And it will work to make permits and licenses automatically renew for the next 12 months. I'll also form a red tape commission to cut the friggin' red tape, to reduce the burdensome regulation and unnecessary costs and delays, top to bottom, across all the agencies. And it will be permanent. And I'm prepared to use every tool in the city's toolkit to help property owners relieve small businesses of back rent and to help business owners negotiate or cover their outstanding utility bills. All of these together will help our existing small businesses stay open and start hiring again. But today, listen, I want to talk about the next phase of that effort and how we can help experienced business owners and first-time entrepreneurs start new businesses and create jobs in our communities. And what I know is that starting a small business is one of the most important, yet one of the riskiest things anybody can do. It means risking everything on a dream. And many of our city's entrepreneurs had that shot stolen from them by the pandemic. But with a little help, I know we can give them a second chance. Government should be there to support you, to do everything possible to unleash the creativity and the entrepreneurship. I want to revitalize the neighborhoods and create jobs. And when I'm mayor, it will. We know that helping businesses is one of the most effective ways to get New Yorkers back to work. New small businesses are amongst our biggest job creators. They generate roughly 2.5 million new jobs nationwide. That's roughly 2.5 times the number of new jobs that large mature companies generate. Just think about if we're able to level the playing field so that entrepreneurs compete on ingenuity, work ethic, and perseverance rather than language they speak, who they know, or the amount of money they start with. And imagine if city government treated entrepreneurs as customers. As someone who knows a few things about client service, I promise an entirely new approach when I'm at City Hall. When I'm mayor, getting city approval for a new business will literally be as easy as downloading an app to your phone and signing up. Now, here's how I'm going to do it. I will appoint a deputy mayor for small women and minority-owned businesses who will be empowered to drive reform and greater accountability across all the agencies. We'll interact with small businesses and mediate interagency disputes, of which you all know there are many, far too many. New and prospective business owners will be able to register and communicate with the city's Department of Small Business Services. We'll also connect them with the local banks and the community organizations in their neighborhood who can help them secure capital and begin to put a business plan together. I will also eliminate the fees for starting a new business entirely. Under my administration, there will be no city fees or registration costs for at least 2 years from the establishment of a new firm. Let me repeat, no city fees or registration costs for at least 2 years starting on day one. When New Yorkers any of the city's employment systems, they'll receive information about getting a new job. But we'll also expand the services to better support people with a viable idea for a new business. We'll give them access to simple, easy to understand information and resources about starting a new business translated into their native language. We'll connect them with experienced business leaders who can provide mentorship, which, as we know, is one of the most vital things when you're starting a new business. There's no reason the city should do what others can do better. My Department of Small Business Services will take a supporting role to the business networks, lenders, and not-for-profits who are best positioned to help. And they'll have the opportunity to earn what I'm calling an NYC MBA. It'll be a marquee program in partnership with CUNY and other local universities, Small Business Use Services, Human Resources Administration, NYCHA, and the New York Public Library, and the Department of Youth and Community Development. It will provide hands-on education to entrepreneurs about starting and scaling their small businesses. Now, when it comes to inspections and approvals, far too many startups cannot afford to pay commercial rents in this city while their doors remain closed, waiting for the inspector to show up. As part of my comeback plan, I promise to reduce wait times for regulatory approval to 90 days. 90 days. And I'm committed to that. Our regulations are so complex and so onerous that an entire cottage industry of expediters have grown up around navigating them. This only creates another cost for startups. So under my administration, expediters beware. Start looking for work. Instead of interacting with 6 different departments, I'll create a one-stop shop. This dedicated and multilingual concierge service will be modeled on Mayor Bloomberg's new business acceleration teams. Small businesses will be treated like the highly valued customers they are. I'll also send out small business support teams to help businesses comply with the planned inspections. They will help speed up the time for approval and avoid penalties and re-inspections. And in cases where businesses need to appeal a fine or regulatory decision, I'll ensure that they can adjudicate their problems through a single point of contact. The goal is simple. Help small business owners get back to doing what they do best, creating jobs. Access to capital is an issue for many. Many small business owners have no choice but to risk their life savings on a new venture. We know that same racial and economic disparities that affect our schools, our public safety, and our infrastructure also affect our small businesses. It's just hard to access funding when you live in a low-income area. If we want our comeback to reach every New Yorker, we need to get resources in the hands of the community banks to fund small and minority-owned businesses and the next generation of entrepreneurs. I've talked previously about creating a community bank initiative that would recapitalize the CDFIs and put more capital in the hands of small businesses. My Comeback Bank initiative will support these local lending organizations by investing in their balance sheets so they can provide more low-interest loans and philanthropic grants and even equity. And let's expand the number of channels that entrepreneurs can access through funding and increase the amount of money that flows through them. I'll help convene the local angel investor funds tied to neighborhood incubators through public-private partnerships with business improvement districts and the local chambers of commerce. They'll not only recruit and cultivate entrepreneurs, but help source locations, advise them on the business plan, provide financial management, provide technological assistance, coach, and foster relationships. And it won't be City Hall deciding on whether an idea is worthy. Peer reviews will evaluate proposals and choose which ones to back. And there's even more we can do. We're facing the largest commercial vacancy rate in 3 decades. Let's turn this into an opportunity by using the city's convening power and my relationships in the private sector. I'll work with the real estate community, including many of you here, to increase the amount of space available for small businesses to rent throughout each borough. We can create community job hubs, help the local organizations invest in commercial corridors around the city with public space improvements, flexible workspace that can support local jobs, and workforce training for in-demand skills. This approach would support economic development and keep our neighborhoods diverse. That means a mix of convenient large brands, as well as the all vital family-owned favorites we love on our street corners. Similarly, let's put our vacant space to use in creative ways, especially in Midtown, where we see so many shuttered storefronts. Let's make vacant space available to entrepreneurs and provide financial support to make that space available. Let's turn vacant space into temporary co-working space, food courts, and pop-up shops where the seeds of entrepreneurship can grow. Doing so will do this. It will help Midtown evolve into an even greater live, work, play 24/7 community, much as we did in Lower Manhattan in the years after 9/11. And when our city is back on its feet, the small businesses we support will be strong enough to move into standalone spaces where they can hang their shingle. Business, as we all know, is cyclical. And each successful growth business will move on and make way for a new entrepreneur with a new idea. Finally, as businesses grow, let's scale them. I'll create a program for small businesses to get a digital storefront on the internet using a partnership with CUNY. We'll also engage high school interns who can do this work as part of their curriculum. I'm also proposing that we require a small business impact statement from the city council for any new law or regulation affecting the business community. Just as we conduct a financial impact statement on new legislation, we should understand the business impact on a bill before it becomes a law. When we do, we need to conduct in-depth inspections. Let's do it with a smartphone app. That way, inspectors can immediately send the results to the affected businesses and allow them to get up and running immediately instead of losing money and jobs on paperwork. This is the 21st century, and our government should reflect that. I'll also use the city's purchasing power to support our comeback. I'll develop a program to target city contracts toward businesses under 5 years old with the goal of scaling up the target over time. And I'll create a New York City export hub that connects small exporters to businesses in other cities and countries so they begin to scale. Now, I know this may sound like a lot to do, but it centers on a simple truth. No jobs, no city. And yet, time and time and time again, our leaders have squandered the opportunities to create jobs. We can't tell companies trying to bring jobs to unemployed New Yorkers they're not welcome. And yet, that's the status quo approach. Whether it's Amazon coming to Queens, the development of Industry City, or the new bodega opening on your local street corners, I'm going to be the mayor that says yes, yes to new businesses and new jobs. But for that promise to be credible, we need a mayor who will also improve the quality of life in our city so we don't relapse into the bad old days. One who will keep our city safe and who will fight for every child to receive an excellent education. I wouldn't be here without an excellent education. It should not be the case that our children's lives are determined by their zip code. We need a mayor whose vision of the city includes reimagining how we live and work, but also one who knows we need to pick up the trash and fill our potholes and plow the streets on time. You need a straight shooter who recognizes that our business and government do not have to be at odds. In order for us to survive, they cannot be at odds. You need a mayor who's a realist who understands that we need to prevent high taxes from driving businesses and people away from the city and eroding the revenue we need to take care of those most in need. And we need an experienced leader who can bring accountability to a problem where too many others have passed the buck. Let me be straight. Today we face significant challenges, but we also did in the 70s and after the 87 crash and after the horror of 9/11 and the crisis of 2008. And what I know is that Abney knows these challenges better than anyone. I'm running for mayor because I know that together we can solve these challenges. I'm offering an innovative but realistic plan to regenerate economic growth, make our streets safe, and ensure New York City remains the blessed place to work, live, and to raise a family. What I know, based on my track record, is that together we can lead the greatest, most inclusive economic comeback in our city's history. One that takes us not back to the pre-pandemic status quo, but to the promise of a 21st century economy for all. I hope you'll join me. Go to rayformayor.com. I want to say thank you, Abney, not only for having me here as the 10th and most memorable, for all that you've done through the decades to make sure that New York City's best days are ahead of it and not behind it.
Thank you, Ray. That was a Amazing. Thank you for the detailed plan. I think that's probably one of the most detailed plans that we have heard. I love your no jobs, no city, no jobs, no dignity. Amen to that, my brother. But more importantly, thank you for taking the time to really lay out your well thought jobs plan as well as your small business plan. So let's jump right in. You ready?
I'm ready. If you're ready, I'm ready. Abney, what y'all got? Okay. It's all about New York. You got the best, brightest mind that exists in this city about to ask me questions. I'm all in. What y'all got, Abney?
All right. So probably the most important question I'm going to ask you this morning, right? So you launched your campaign with the video produced by Spike Lee.
I did.
And you recently was endorsed by P. Diddy, Jay-Z, and Nas.
Drop the mic.
Three of the most successful music artists from New York City. Why are your celebrity endorsements better than the other candidates? But more importantly, can you get P. Diddy, Jay-Z, and Nas to do a video for Abney produced by Spike Lee? Very important.
That. You got to get my man who shot and directed the first, Mutai Ali. So you got to get my man in. So why did they decide to do this? Because they all grew up the way I grew up, right? Everybody started at the bottom. When they started at the bottom, now we're here. We started at the bottom. We know how great this city is. It gave us the opportunity. And this city remains the biggest stage that exists anywhere. If you want to make it, you got to come to New York City. So Jay and Nas and Diddy, all of whom started here, all of whom made it here on the biggest stage, decided that as they think about the future of this city, who can they trust? And whom can they believe? Who's got a track record? And who, as they say, who's got the receipts? And so while my mother says be known by your deeds, I haven't gone out and advertised any of the things I've been fortunate to accomplish. But what I have done is made certain that I extended the ladder. When I came into the world of finance, there's only one or two people who look like me. And so getting there, having to go through conscious and unconscious bias in the ways that they had to get to to the level that they've achieved, which is the iconic status. They recognize that my journey has been as hard as their journey. Just hasn't been as publicized, but they recognize that. So what that reflects is the respect and belief. And can we get them to do the Abney video directed by Spike? I got to get in the office for that to happen.
All right, day one. We have your task for day one. Perfect. But to expand on that a little bit more seriously, we've seen your campaign get hyper local and what seems to be a more targeted effort to reach communities and neighborhoods that may have historically been missed in campaigns. You also use local trusted messengers like celebrities, but also neighborhood endorsers to get your campaign platform to the average voter. I'm really interested in understanding how or if your campaign used the information that came into your campaign from talking to these communities to really shape your campaign platform. And if so, what are some of the examples or ideas you've heard from these disenfranchised communities that shape the way you see the future of New York needs to be?
So the answer is yes. If I think just about the small business plan, walking with the leadership in the Bronx at Westchester Square, walking on Nostrand Avenue with Suites Brooklyn, just sitting down with the small business owners before we communicated our small business plan, part of the overall jobs plan, getting the input from those business owners about how the challenges were, how they were meeting the challenges. They said, Ray, we pay Con Edison 100 cents on the dollar and we're making 10 cents on the dollar. And before I had these conversations, I thought that the capital that we're going to provide for them existed in three forms. Going to exist in the form of grants, low interest loans, and equity. And when I mentioned low interest loans, I said, Ray, you just be really aware, we can't take on any more debt. So it has to come in the form of grants, has to come in the form of some kind of equity. And having that kind of interaction. And you go to Westchester Square, which needs deep repair. Just look at what is clearly dilapidated subway, the infrastructure subway with paint peeling and kids running around. And I look at a restaurant like Shanghai Red that's done everything that it was supposed to do, one of the epicenters of the community, gone through, put up all of the infrastructure that's necessary for outdoor dining. And it's gotten so many fines that it can't stay open. So the answer is, Melba, yes, my policies, my plans have been informed by going hyper local, talking to New Yorkers, understanding the challenges they face, especially during COVID. Another example is on deeply affordable housing, the Bronx Commons, which some of you may know about. If you don't, you should look at it. It is, 163rd Street, Melrose, in the Melrose section of the Bronx. I spent last Saturday there with Donovan Russell, who helped design it. And the community goes from those who are formerly homeless to people who make 30% to 40% to 50% of AMI. And it's a mixture. The rent goes from $225 a month to the most that you can pay is $1,999 a month for a 3-bedroom. That is so essential to a New York where 45% of New Yorkers are rent burdened. So it goes to my housing plan. So my response and what you see communicated is not something that exists in the academy. It exists, in all due respect to the academy, it exists on the ground. I have gone and will continue to go local, hyper local, because that's where the people are. I'm going home. This is how I grew up. This ain't nothing new to me. This is how I grew up. So I'm talking to the people who are talking to me the way I grew up, listening to those people, listening to my neighbors, listening to New Yorkers whose lives are impacted by the impact of COVID, and those lives were impacted before COVID.
Right. So, and again, I just want to reiterate, I really appreciate sort of the creative and innovative and practical sort of solutions to some of the issues that our city has faced for generations and are facing due to COVID-19 and all the other social and economic and all the other sort of racial unrest across the country. So let's unpack sort of your jobs plan and your small business plan a little bit. Today, you talked about, driving the most inclusive economic comeback in the city's history, bringing back 500,000 jobs. You announced new efforts to make New York City the best place in the world to start a small business, which I appreciate. And you've recognized that we need to support small businesses now and as we continue to recover from the pandemic. Through your proposed Comeback Jobs Accelerator program, how will you provide fiscal relief, right? This is one question we always ask here at ABNY. How will you pay for it? Especially when we're looking to support small businesses of the city and to reduce unemployment and steer economic recovery for all.
So let me outline the components of it. The components of it are 50,000 jobs where we take care of half of the wages for 1 year. That'll cost, let's call it $450 million or so. We will also not only subsidize, but help negotiate the retention of New York City sales tax receipts. That's going to be circa $350 million. And then we're going to waive fees. That's going to be circa $100 million. And if you go through, as you know that I have, if you go through and look at what we're going to get from the federal stimulus package, we're going to get $5.9 billion directly to the city. And let's assume the following. Let's assume that we have $2.3 billion that gets used this year. So that leaves me with $1.8 and $1.8 billion. So that $1.8 billion, and I'm going to add to that as I begin my accelerator program, is going to generate circa $300 million or so of revenue. So I got $2.1 billion against that 350, 450, call it $800, $900 million. And that 450, $900 million is going to cost me. The 450 is in 2 years. So it cost me all total $900 million. I'm going to spread that out over 2 years. So that's going to make certain that in the fiscal year 23, that I've come out with a slight surplus. And then in the fiscal years 24, 25, going through the same arithmetic, I'm going to come out with a slight deficit, but I'm also going to I'm going to add to that a 5% PEG, which is the program, as you know, program to eliminate the gap, which has been quite effective. And what that's going to result in is in 24 and 25, a slight deficit, which we can manage. So that's how I'm going to go through and pay for it. That's assuming that the $5.9 billion that we've been given from the federal government, that $5.9 billion is going to be spent smartly. Now, that does not deal with my go big part of the plan, which is infrastructure, right? Infrastructure means I can go to my capital budget, and I've sourced $2.5 billion out of that capital budget, which I can do. Now, the constraint in what I can borrow my capital budget is the debt service that exists in my operating budget. And that comes through a calculation that they do over the last 3 to 4 to 5 years. So I have capacity in my capital budget, and the debt service I can take care of in my operating budget. And I'm going to put 2.5 plus 2.5, I'm going to put circa $12 billion. I'll generate totally $12 billion against my $1.8 billion spend.
I really appreciate you going into the weeds.
Oh, you want me? If there's some more, you want me to tell you what the ROI on that is? Because it depends on how deep you want to go.
Andrew Rain on the call would really appreciate that.
Get Andrew Rain, get Weisbrod, get the experts, because they looked at my numbers. I know they're looking at the numbers. So really, can they do that? The answer is yes. I've gone through and pressure tested this against the biggest critics out there, and it works.
I love it. And that's when we talk about sort of bringing the city back and having someone who is an executive of the city who has the fiscal chops and understanding to do it. Just your explanation there just really illustrates your understanding of what it really takes and how to pay for it, which is really important. So I
would be remiss if I would be remiss as the 10th one here to say, I guarantee you, and I didn't hear any of the 9, nobody going to that level of detail. Guaranteed. Right. They ain't been there.
Great. So I just want to go back to the infrastructure part of it a little bit. You talked about it, and thank you for bringing it up. And we know, right, over the last year, unemployment has rose significantly. And as certain industries struggle to continue to work in the middle of this pandemic. And as we look to recover, job creation is important, right? We talked about that. And today you talked about the launch of your aggressive infrastructure program. That will fully embed workforce development programs to help workers displaced from industries. So question, what are some of the specific infrastructure projects and focus areas that you hope to tackle? And can you talk a little bit about, you talked a little bit about this, but could you unpack it a little more? How do you plan to work with the public, with a public-private partnership, right, a PPP, in different sectors, right? You talked a lot about partnering with real estate to identify vacant properties, to put small businesses in, which I love. But what are some of the ways that you will work with the private sector on these projects to create jobs while improving the infrastructure of the city?
So infrastructure is big. And how do I think about infrastructure? I think about infrastructure similarly to how the federal government, the Biden-Harris administrations think about infrastructure. And let me be specific. We need to deal with sewage mains. In some of our boroughs, they are frequently threatened by sewage backups, which clearly create a pretty negative impact on our quality of life. So you got to deal with that. It has been a long time since we've dealt with fractured bridges. And I think about the 100-year flood that comes every 5 years, where we're threatened in Red Hook, in the Rockaways, in Coney Island, in City Island, in Lower Manhattan. And we've had it on the books that since Sandy, we're going to repair this. We've yet to do anything about it. I got no shovel in the ground. I got no cranes in the air. I got no hard hats on the field, which is what's going to make certain that we get the city back up and running. And oh, by the way, deeply affordable housing. When we were building, we built 2.2 units of housing for every new private sector job. Now that's maybe 0.7. So we know that the demand has far exceeded the supply, and we've yet to be able to do anything about building. And when we built the last time we built area median income, we built 80 to 100% of area median income. So those people who are rent burdened, who make well below the area median income, well below the 50% area median income, simply can't afford to live where they want to live. And so my plan, deeply affordable housing, fractured bridges, sewage mains, and oh, by the way, I have this other thing called broadband, where 1.5 million New Yorkers don't have broadband. And there's other project out there that has been accelerated, which the Transportation Secretary Buttigieg has worked with the government, with the Albany on, which is Gateway. Mm-hmm. So I look at Gateway, which today, unless we alleviate it, we're still going to have the Bronx with the highest incidence of asthma, maybe in the country. So we need to deal with that. So infrastructure projects, including what we're going to do about climate, what we do about Gateway, that's going to get accelerated. What we do about deeply affordable housing, that will get accelerated. My plan calls for an additional 350,000 units, which is 10% more than what we've done. We haven't built deeply affordable housing in quite some time. That's why I reference what has taken place in the Bronx with the Bronx Commons, which is an example, 305 units, it costs $185 million or so. It's got a concert hall there. It's got facilities for our elders, on which we need to focus. So there are examples out there. Now, how will we do this? There are 3 or 4 levels of capital going to be available. One, the federal government, in the second tranche of this large stimulus package, has outlined infrastructure as a huge aspect of that. That's number one. Number two, what we get from the state. Number three, what we can generate on our own balance sheet. And by the way, when you generate that on the balance sheet, you need to have somebody who's able to go and talk with the rating agencies, who doesn't need an interpreter, but somebody can go there so we can preserve our credit rating. The other part to this is public-private. You're right. If I think about the number of dollars in the infrastructure funds that exist trying to put dollars to work, the large pension funds, New York pension funds that have yet to allocate many resources to infrastructure. Look at the Canadian pension funds, and also look at the large infrastructure funds that reside in this city. And rather than giving 15+% internal rate of return, I give them a risk adjusted 8 to 10% when they're getting 2% now, maybe, depending upon how they're investing the dollars that sit with from their LPs. There's a way to engage so that we win-win. You're going to have to alleviate some or relax some of the constraints on their ability to access capital on the debt side, but there's a way for us to do public-private partnerships to increase the scale of that which I have in mind.
So it sounds like, I mean, I love sort of the projects, the specific projects that you identified that will spur job creation, infrastructure projects. And it sounds like you have your 100-day plan already, or at least around
listen, I ain't doing this part-time. This okay. And this is not something because I know the members of ABNY who are going to be scrutinizing this. So it will withstand that scrutiny because I got so much respect for them. I got to come with the A game. This is the ABNY game I'm talking about, okay?
I love it. Know your audience. Know your audience. So you talked a lot about sort of the opportunities where we can stimulate the economy, right? You talked about supporting small businesses. You talked about jobs. You talked about jobs specifically around infrastructure. And we know historically that the economic growth and wealth of the city has not always been executed equitably. Right. So along these lines, I'd like to talk a little bit about how you recently helped to write the groundbreaking report that Stephen referenced in his opening on the economic impact of systemic racism, titled Closing the Racial Inequality Gaps. Can you speak a little bit more about the findings of the report and how might you use these findings to guide your policies and initiatives as mayor?
Okay, stay with me, Abney. Stay with me. I'm not going to go as granular. I'm going to get to some granularity here, but just stay with me on this. The report to which Melva is referencing is a report that I wrote the forward to, which I think is probably the definitive study in the economy. The Academy will recognize it as such because it was done by a highly regarded economist by the name of Dana Peterson, along with the support, obviously, of the lead economist at Citi. But what that report identifies is that through the systemic inequities that exist in healthcare, in the criminal justice system, in the economy, and in education, the impact on the U.S. economy has been $16 trillion. That if we were to begin to repair today, the impact on the U.S. economy would be an additional $5 trillion. So that sets the stage. It then goes through and amplifies in the categories that I've outlined the impact of that racism on not only the U.S. economy, but on the Black and brown communities. For example, what we know is that in 1954, the Brown versus Board of Education decision that we would desegregate schools with all deliberate speed, Charlie Hamilton Houston and Thurgood Marshall decided to address school desegregation. We also know that in 1954, about an hour away from here, there was a beacon of suburban America called Levittown, which was government subsidized housing for veterans. But part of that regulation was to redline and make specific that Black and brown people should not benefit from that regulation and from that government subsidy. That began the modern day era of segregated neighborhoods. And so we have to look at the history here. That also began when you think about home ownership, the result of which today is that Black home ownership and the economics behind that is a fraction of what white home ownership is. Now let's fast forward to the current New York City dynamics. In 2020, New York City spent $22.5 billion. 1.9 billion, less than 5%, went to MWBEs. A de minimis amount of that got to Black and brown businesses. And oh, by the way, 82%, 8 out of 10 MWBEs got zero. So if we think about equitable distribution, that clearly is not evidence of anything that is equitable and certainly didn't get distributed. And so as we think about this and how I think about this and have a deputy mayor that is focused on this with my accountability, there are examples around the country historically, what Maynard Jackson did in Atlanta and what Harold Washington did in Chicago, making certain that we're intentional about how we were inclusive in our communities. And so my plan is to make sure that we're inclusive. And how will you do this? To make sure in construction, by the way, in the city, we have a goal in construction of 8% of the construction budget goes to NWBEs. 8% is the goal. We've gotten to 0.7%. So we have to be intentional here. And you have to have a mayor who's got visibility, understands how the world works, and can feel a team that focuses on this with a city that I know is going to be committed to this. It has to be the greatest, most inclusive economic comeback in the history of this city.
No, and I appreciate that. And here at Abney, as we, think about ways that we can partner with other leaders in the public and private sector, being inclusive and doing it, thinking about equality, right? True equality is something that we think about every day. So I really thank you for taking the time to go through that and talk about that report a little bit, because I think that perspective is going to be really important for our next executive of this city and as a partner of Abney. So I appreciate that.
You mean that perspective is going to be really important to Ray McGuire when he becomes mayor? Not my translation.
Exactly. That's what I meant. That was the translation.
I just listen. I just got to apologize up front for correcting the record.
So on to public safety for a minute. I know accountability and management are two ways that you plan to address issues within the NYPD. You've outlined a plan to appoint a deputy mayor for public safety to oversee the NYPD and other criminal justice agencies, as well as a plan to hold entire chain of commands accountable for officer conduct. What do you think? Why do you think that focus area is so important in reforming how NYPD operates? And can you also talk about other aspects of public safety for our cities and for our communities that you plan to focus on?
Yeah, let me divide this way. For what we need between NYPD and the community is what I call RAP, respect, accountability, and proportionality. That respect has been breached in large part because we haven't seen any of the serial abusers for whom we pay $200 million a year. We've not seen any evidence of them being held accountable. So we need to have accountability. And why is that? Because proportionality is going to be key. How do you respond to an incident? It has been said by many that if the only thing that you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. When it comes to many of our communities, especially Black and brown, it's a sledgehammer. And so we need to make sure that we address accountability, which is how I've come up with the deputy mayor and how I'm going to hold a chain of command responsible and how we're going to empower the CCRB with investigative authority. And rather than take 48 days to view video cam footage, it's going to take 48 hours. And importantly, we need to invest in our community services. Note that $5 billion or so coming out of the Biden plan hidden there is $5 billion to go against gang violence, gun violence. And I'll come to that. But let's make certain that we address the accountability that needs to happen between the community and law enforcement. We can reallocate. I am not for defund. Just be clear. Anybody thinking that, I should be clear. I am not for defund. I'm for better policing. And I'm for making certain that some of those dollars get into the community. And that means community policing, returning to that. At one point, we had police athletic leagues where the community and the police got to know each other. We had community policing. We need to return to that. And we need to invest in the violence interrupters who know what's taking place on the ground. And that gets to that respect, accountability, and proportionality. And once we've held one or two of the serial abusers accountable, that then begins to restore that respect. And we invest in the community organizations, that begins to restore that respect because we know each other. We recognize the importance of law enforcement. We need better policing, but we also recognize the importance of law enforcement to do what they take the oath to do, which is protect us. Now, public safety is clearly So I think about safety in the form of gun violence, safety in the form of how we conduct our lives daily, the threat, the anxiety behind physical harm, and also what's taking place for the mentally ill, which is also part of my plan. But the gun violence, let me be clear about that. We need to get the guns off the street. And that means that I'm going to take gun violence head on, better quality of life, shift resources with the NYPD budget to increase the number of officers focused on seizing the illegal guns and how they get to the 10 precincts suffering the highest incidence of violent crime. It should not be the case that it's easier to get an illegal gun than it is to get a legal tablet. We have to stop that. So I'm going to invest in making certain that we get the guns off the street. I'm going to make certain we have enough better policing to make certain that people feel comfortable and safe when they leave their homes. And in my plan, I will launch emergency social services, which is going to be a citywide 24-hour, 7-day-a-week network of mental health, drug abuse, and homeless specialists that will replace police intervention for non-criminal behavior. That the rise of incidents, and I'm going to say allegedly, Rigoberto Lopez, a New Yorker who's been suffering from large mental health issues, goes into a subway and stabs people. We can't have that happen. So we need to think more about how we use Kendra's law, and we need to think more about how we make certain that New Yorkers remain safe. So it's safety, it is reduce, eliminate the anxiety that we have going outside of our homes, it's dealing with the mentally ill, and it's also holding our police accountable and having a culture of respect, accountability, and proportionality.
So 2 more questions before I bring Stephen in to wrap us up. First, I'd like to ask about public education. I know public education is a top priority for you. And as one of your measures to address inadequacies in the education for the city, you have proposed Raise Tutor NYC program, which will help schools meet reading challenges and create pathways to opportunity for college-bound New Yorkers. How do you plan to work with educators and organizers and organizations on the ground to implement this important initiative to get children to the appropriate educational level, especially coming off the heels of COVID, where I feel that, our young people have been set back years?
Our kids have been set back years, but they're set back years before COVID. And so I need to work directly with the teachers, with the educating world, to make certain that our kids get the proper education. Pre-K is good, but by the time many of our kids get to pre-K, they're already behind. I want to start at 0 to 4, as these children are developing their learning. I want to make sure that we have affordable childcare, that we have care for the parents, and that we appropriately compensate those caregivers. And then, from my account, I want to make sure that every child can read by the end of the 3rd grade. Why is that? Because the educators will tell us that between 0 and the end of the 3rd grade, our children are learning to read. After that, they're reading to learn. We have lost far too many whom we didn't teach how to read. So I want to guarantee that, which gets to the tutor corps, which you referenced. We can use tutors when we certify, we can use retired teachers, we can use existing educators, but no child leaves the end of the 3rd grade in New York City without the ability to read. 6th grade, I want to get them exposed to different opportunities. I want to make sure that they're digitally and financially literate, and then they want to expose them becoming coders and plumbers and welders and software engineers. By the 8th grade, I want to give them summer jobs. So that's public-private partnerships, summer jobs in areas where they have an interest. So by the time they graduate, they can do one of 3 things. They can go into that summer job career to which they've been exposed. They can go to a 2-year, 4-year college, cradle to career. And I've always said that what I want to have happen to begin to address the impact of COVID is have summer school. Parents can opt out, but I want to have a summer school, intense summer school. Again, no child leaves the 3rd grade without the ability to read.
I love when I ask you a question, you answer it directly. It's great. It's a great thing. So for my last question, before I bring Stephen back on to wrap us up, what is your road to victory? How will you win this thing? How will you become the next mayor of this great city of New York City?
Listen, voters are looking for the leadership that I can bring. Our research tells us primary voters are drawn to my business background and trust someone like me to get the city back on its feet. In contrast, voters are skeptical of the career politicians who they think are part of a broken system. They had their chance. We've gone backwards. No candidate can build the coalition that I can build. I'm building a coalition that spans the full diversity of the Democratic electorate, focused on the city's economy, around and supporting small businesses, got visceral appeal across the city. And as the most accomplished Black leaders in America, business I have unique appeal to Black voters. My story is a self-made man. It's compelling to Latino and Asian voters as well, who admire the hard work and perseverance and opportunity. And we're built to peak at the right time. I am number 10, which means I'm in and I'm ready to go. And people remember this just because the plans that I've come with are comprehensive plans with a track record of having executed. People want something different. And it's hyper local, as you said. I'm going borough by borough, neighborhood by neighborhood, voter by voter, so they can understand they can understand my story as their story, and what I want for their kids is what I had for myself. It shouldn't be by accident. It should be by intent. And so we're engaging across the spectrum with the local leaders, and those local leaders are getting out more people whom they touch. So I've got every confidence that along with the Abney support at rayformayor.com, with the plans I've outlined, the track record of having committed and actually gotten things done on behalf of others, that there is no cavalry, but what I intend to do is to lead New York City and Abney and all New Yorkers who love New York the way I do forward. The best days of New York City are ahead of it. That's my plan. That's my path to victory.
Okay, thank you. And with that, Stephen, would you like to wrap us up?
Yeah, as it's the 10th, I want to do one thing I have not done yet at the end. I want to ask just a final question and say thank you, Ray. We all want our kids to read, right? I mean, I have a third grader. I watch that, and it couldn't be truer. Like, in that struggle and the passion you want for them as a parent to succeed. We want jobs. We want dignity. I really meant a lot. You said, no jobs, no city, no jobs, no dignity. Why do we, and you talked a lot, I was very struck by the numbers about minority and women-owned businesses and how woefully short we are. So we always have our heart in the right place, but we fail, right? Again and again. So I guess, why do we fail? And then because with the heart in the right place, and how do you think you make it so we don't continue to fail as mayor?
Because I think it's been all about me and not about we. And the public has suffered as a result of that. People had their chances. And the priority that has to be at the highest priority is in what's in the best interest of New Yorkers. Remember, I didn't get termed out. I'm not looking for a promotion. I haven't been part of any administration. I'm not in anybody's pocket. I'm not wed to one affiliation or the other. I'm solely focused on what's in the best interest of New Yorkers. And the other thing that you should know is my truth ain't changing. I ain't a weather vane. I don't have to remember tomorrow what I told you today because it ain't changing. I'm like that great philosopher of the 20th century, Sir Popeye. I am what I am. I believe in that in which I believe. I ain't changing. I love this city. And it's clear that others may love the city, but they may love themselves more. I quit my day job to do this. When I called my then 94, now 95-year-old mother, told her I quit my job, she thought I'd lost my mind. But I love this city, is what I told her. And at a moment in crisis, if I can take the things that I've been fortunate to get and lead this city forward, I'm the leader that in whom people can trust and in whom they could believe, who's so focused on what's in their best interest.
Ray,
that's what distinguishes me from all the others. Remember, number 10, go become number 10. Last one you hear, number 1. That's what we're talking about.
Ray, thank you for your passion. Thank you for your dedication. Thank you for sharing so much with us. We wish you the best in this race, and we hope to hear from you again.
Thank you, Anthony. So much respect and appreciation, gratitude. And for Stephen and the harshest critic that exists on the planet, Melva M. Miller, I'm so excited. I got through this thing. This is like all right with me. I'm going to drop the mic. I'm going to cut the whole audio system off. Okay.
I also just want to take an opportunity to thank our members for sticking with us for 10 weeks. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And if you have additional questions for any of the candidates, if you don't have direct line of contact, we are happy to connect you, and we will